The United States federal government began fixing ethanol prices, which is a product of corn. This effect has been pretty substantial. There was a 2005 Energy Policy Act and a 2007 Energy Independence and Security Act and several others. And these acts and this program had quite a few impacts, both intended and unintended. For instance, it could reduce carbon emissions, which are linked to climate change. On the other hand, farming is often an excuse for deforestation, which releases sequestered carbon. This evaluation uses impact theory to derive the success or failure of this program from its outcome and impacts. To give you a little bit of background and history on farm aid, this program began in 1933, although prior to that time, the U.S. government did promote farming through federal land grants. This was during the Great Depression, and farmers were no longer able to meet their production costs. The very first Farm Bill gave the U.S. control to change supply levels and raise market prices. There have been 15 farm bills since. In modern times, we have the rise of supermarkets, increased national and global trade, which increases the profit share of distributors. However, it's often at the expense of farmers. Also, we've seen a shift, possibly related to the decrease in profits, of farmers to other careers and other interests. So farming has changed a lot. The farm aid that we have currently includes crop insurance, which is very important for any kind of changes in the market or problems with production. There are all kinds of tax breaks on property taxes, capital gains, maintenance, equipment. There is disaster relief, which is extremely important to farmers. It's very difficult to plan ahead when you're banking all on your crop every single year. And we also have, in more modern times, as of 2014, help for local farmers to create direct access to a market. These are markets such as roadside stands, pick-your-own-fruit operations, and nurseries, which require zoning changes, and also farmers markets, which oftentimes receive federal, or which can receive federal funding now. And there is the ethanol requirement, which, although it has changed from being part of a farm stimulus package, it still stimulates farmers by providing a mandate for ethanol refineries. The federal programs go back to 1933, and they were instituted to control the variability that we see with weather and market fluctuations. Subsidies have increased greatly for the commodity crops, which are corn, wheat, rice, soy, and cotton. For instance, Gardner, Hardy, and Parks showed that if federal funding had been cut in half between 1987 and 1997, the area that's planted would be 189 million less acres. That would be a reduction in 22% of the land devoted to commodities. So these subsidies make a huge impact. They have been such linked to agribusinesses and large farms that in 2014 Congress instituted a cap of $125,000 per year for income for farmers to receive subsidies. However, because agribusinesses are so complex, they're able to appear on paper as multiple small farms and continue to reap tax dollars. They circumvent the law. And the problem also with the ethanol funding and commodities funding is that it has increased government funding of commodity crops, which increases land value and property taxes. Although this has not been a huge factor for the costs of agribusinesses, oftentimes farmers find that their property taxes, small farmers find their property taxes have become so high that they're no longer able to maintain a profit. Ethanol production has been linked, as I said before, to the 2002 Farm Bill, and it has also been increased in 2005 Energy Policy Act. And this evaluation is to discover the changes that might have resulted from this ethanol program, as well as other impacts that could have occurred. Gasoline, the federal legislation itself requires gas to contain a percentage of corn-based ethanol. This, in effect, is intended to reduce carbon emissions, but the conversion from forest land to ethanol production would actually increase emissions. So we need more information to find out if this program has been successful based on its impact. Part of what we're looking at is quantitative impacts, or impacts of amount. The market price of corn has been higher than the cost of production because of these subsidies. And this is not the main intended effect. So the change over time can be shown by the area that corn is being farmed in the U.S. For the qualitative analysis, Motamed, McPhail, and Phillips conducted a study on 12 states within the Corn Belt. They showed over time that they analyzed 2,109 individual units for change over time on 776,485 square miles. Impacts of this are measured in a qualitative evaluation. Surveys were taken from various sources, and I collected those surveys as secondary sources from stakeholders, farmers, government agencies, universities, and even private research firms. The various stakeholders, too, have different the various farmers weigh in different ways. The subsidies affect agribusinesses differently than they affect small farmers. First, I would like to discuss the results of the qualitative analysis. Here you can see the data for acres by state. And I would like to point out a line right here where it shows the mean agricultural area for different states. All of the average of all the states together. In 2006, the mean was 10,000 acres. Went down to a little bit, 9.8, up to 11, and then up to 11,542 acres. So the average area in each state has increased overall. Also, other aspects of this study, they released that in 2005 there were 81.8 million acres, but by 2015 we have 97.4 million acres that are farmed in commodities. So the area of corn has increased quite a bit. The second chart shows the yearly increase in the number of ethanol producing plants. You can see total numbers here in 2006 at 84, and each year the amount has increased until in 2010 we're up to 158 plants. Also, looking at the numbers of millions of gallons of ethanol, you can see from 4,536, the amount doubled in 2010 to 11,476, more than doubled in fact. The figure here shows the area that ethanol plants serviced. In 2006, you see the green areas were the areas that ethanol plants were able to service. By 2010, with the increase in the number of ethanol plants, the service area increased, and you can see these areas of red where service area has expanded. In fact, even in an area that did not even have access to ethanol plants prior to 2010, during 2006. So the area serviced throughout the United States by ethanol plants has increased. The 2014 Farm Bill attempted to remedy some of the negative effects that subsidies have and the undue burden that subsidies have placed on small businesses. For instance, they provided some benefits to farmers who grew fruits and vegetables. They provided benefits, but those benefits were not enough, and they have not achieved widespread results. To this day, farmers admit in surveys that the benefit of growing commodity crops remains higher. In addition, change is not likely to occur soon because agribusinesses spend millions of dollars each year lobbying to ensure that there will be no reduction in the corn subsidies. That brings us to a key point. Politics have always been involved since the inception of farm aid. During the New Deal, FDR offered swing states farm subsidies as a bargaining tool. And in modern days, from 1955 to 2012, 75% of farm aid went to the wealthiest 10% of farm businesses. Also, counties with the highest government agriculture assistance to small farmers are those who deal primarily in commodity crops. So the impact has been to affect mainly the agribusinesses in a positive way and a few small farmers in certain communities. There is an impact on human health. Because arugula, radishes, broccoli, and squash have not received any kind of subsidies and do not receive subsidies such like the commodities do, also beans, these things are not grown by as many farmers. And it affects, the supply that we have affects the American diet, which focuses on corn-fed meat, dairy from corn-fed cows, eggs from corn-fed chickens, and processed foods made from corn. Many people don't even realize how much corn they eat on a daily basis because it's included in processed foods under names such as maltodextrin, citric acid, although many people are aware that corn syrup is practically ubiquitous in the American diet. This has also shown to be an impact on the economy. The Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007, which I mentioned earlier, caused a temporary spike in the demand for corn, such that it exceeded the supply. The rapid purchase of corn caused the price to spike, which was one of the factors in the worldwide financial crash of 2008. Now, it must be remembered that ethanol production is actually only about 5% of farmland in the U.S., so it's not the only thing that could have caused the spike in commodity prices. Other types of foods were factors as well. There was a drought in 2007, and there was also the banking scandal. So, however, it certainly could have been one of the factors that played into it because of the correlation between the act being passed in 2007 and the sudden spike in demand from ethanol refineries. The goal of the program, and as we're looking at outcomes and impacts to see if we've achieved this goal, was to reduce the grams of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere per megajoule of energy produced. Regular gasoline produces from 94 to 46 grams of carbon dioxide per megajoule. which we're trying to get down. Ethanol produces far less than that amount of carbon dioxide per megajoule. However, there is an input of energy to produce the ethanol. If you combine the energy used by the farming machinery in planting and harvesting, in the refineries, which often use fossil fuels to heat the corn to produce the ethanol, you have direct emissions that total around 69 grams of carbon dioxide per megajoule. Also, land is being converted to grow ethanol. Some of it's forest land, some of it's pasture land, but the average land use change will cost an additional 27 grams of CO2 per megajoule per year, every year, spread over 30 years. So together, the emissions from the ethanol production and the land use change are even greater than a regular burning gasoline, over 96 grams of carbon dioxide per megajoule. The values are approximate, but they're estimated at a minimal rate without an increase in the current level of ethanol production. If ethanol production increases as it's slated to do and as it has at the rate that it has increased thus far, the cost will be far higher due to land conversion of more and more marginal lands. The marginal lands are areas which are better suited for ranching and forestry. They're arid or they're mountainous, and they require a high input to produce corn. However, with government subsidies, suddenly this becomes a viable option. They draw in mineral fertilizers such as phosphorus, which are mined and have a limited supply, and they draw in water, which is a limiting factor, and it depletes local sources. So the actual cost, if ethanol continues to be used more and more, would be around 800, what according to the model is 800 grams of carbon dioxide per megajoule for the next 30 years. So it'll be a significant cost if we continue to transition more and more to ethanol fuel use. Based on this evaluation, I would like to offer recommendations. First of all, certain farm safety net aid should not be changed, such as the tax breaks for capital gains and tax breaks on purchasing capital. Access to credit is extremely important for farmers. It helps them get through the rough spots, as well as crop insurance is incredibly expensive, and the federal government helps with that. That is very important to continue. Also, the education that we provide through the agricultural extension offices of the Natural Resource and Conservation Service of the USDA are very important. Better farming practices can help eliminate the need for credit and the problems that could happen due to crop failure. So I recommend that these problems be in place. However, I recommend that over time, Congress reduce and finally eliminate federal funding for alcohol. Although this program has achieved the success of ethanol fuel being increased, this analysis has shown, the analysis has also shown from the survey sources that production tends to benefit agribusinesses more than small farmers. Also, helping small farmers is a greater benefit to the economy in the long run. And we've also discussed the many negative impacts of the ethanol subsidies on the environment, such as in higher rotations, increased fertilizer use, erosion, and for instance, it's more emissions burning ethanol than regular gas due to all the inputs. So the unintended impacts that we see are strong negatives. Now, there is a caveat. There are dangers to reducing the aid for ethanol. Because we have in operation ethanol refineries that would be shut down, This would cause a temporary surplus of corn, which should be avoided by the government at all costs, but it seems like it would be inevitable. Typically, surpluses and market changes don't affect agribusinesses as much, so this is going to hit small farmers. The federal programs that we have in place could help ease this transition. In 1933, the federal government used subsidies to limit production. This should be done again. We already have deficiency payments to subsidize farmers when commodity prices drop. This is something that we need to continue to do. Also, agricultural extension offices, which are in operation in farming communities, can help those who have lost work from ethanol plants to transition into other types of work, especially farming, because that's their specialty. In the short term, however, this will cause big gains for buyers, both distributors and consumers. We're talking about a buyer's market here with these low prices. They can still sell at current prices, but make a huge profit. Also, this would cause a temporary boost to the economy. As things level out in the long term, the prices without the federal subsidies will slowly, the supply will diminish, which will slowly raise prices to reasonable levels, which can again help small farmers. As long as we continue expanding direct vending, the gradual increase in prices should not have a huge impact on consumers who are buying direct from farmers. And also, it is important that we continue to maintain education in crop diversification. The subsidies tend to do the exact opposite. They tend to have farmers go into monocultures, but diversifying the crops will allow farmers to be less vulnerable to crop diseases, to drought, to frost, and sudden environmental upsets. The changes will stimulate commerce in rural communities and could be overall in the long term a huge benefit to the economy. This analysis and this evaluation used impact theory to measure the success. We looked at the outcomes and the impacts of using ethanol as an alternative food. It's clear that agribusinesses have clear benefits, and you can see that they've watched out for their personal interests through lobbying. And you can see also that ethanol use has increased. Our studies have shown that, but also have increased the negative impacts. The ethanol fineries and the gallons have increased, but the demand for corn, for converting land into cornfields, has increased in the process. And that is why I recommend that federal support for ethanol be discontinued. Thank you.